All right, in this video, we're going to talk about media and a framework called TPACK. So it's kind of organized like this. We start by talking about learning styles, which you've probably heard about. And we're going to go from talking about learning styles to media formats. We'll have a little interlude where we talk about TPACK. And then we're going to bring together all these ideas in TPACK and media. So learning styles with a question mark. You probably have heard that some people are visual learners, some people are auditory, some people are kinesthetic, some people read and write. And it's a great idea and it's very widespread. However, they've tried to prove that this is true over and over. They've never been able to actually prove that this is true. So if we give someone content visual or auditory, whichever learning style they have, it doesn't make a difference in how they learn. It's just that some content is better visual and some content is auditory. And we'll get into that more. So this has been a big issue, and this is Education Next, and there's also been pretty major journal articles that talk about the myth of learning styles. And there are some concerns about that. This is from American Psychological Association, which is a really well-known association. And it talked about belief in learning styles myth may be detrimental. I want you to think about why might it not be good to tell a student, look, you're a visual learner or you're an auditory learner. So one of the ways it can be detrimental is that then, say a student sitting in a classroom and they think they're a visual learner and the teacher's not writing anything down. They might just shut off and say, I can't learn because it's not visual. Another reason it could be detrimental is that teachers could spend a lot of time trying to customize content in all the different learning styles when they could be focusing on just really high quality teaching. Okay. And so it's not that we don't want to use different types of media like visual and auditory. It's that people don't have individual ways they learn better than others. It has a lot of other factors. And so we all learn from good quality teaching. So a lot of time when people say I'm a visual learner, it's because they're looking at things that are better taught visually. And that's a very common thing. Most people say they're a visual learner if you start asking people about it. So although you don't need to worry about the learning style of each student, you do need to consider how you're representing your content. Okay, and your content is whatever that you're teaching or you want your students to learn, whether it's solving quadratic equations or adding two-digit numbers or whatever your content is. How do you show that to your students? Do you tell them about it? Do you draw pictures? Do you have them do activities? Whatever your content is going to determine what is the best format to put that into. Now, I know this is really shocking because it's so widespread to believe in these learning styles, but there is a lot of evidence saying that teaching to learning styles does not help anything. It's better just focus on the content and how to represent it. So when we're talking about representing, we're going to talk just briefly about media formats and genres. And this little joke by this friend, he's at Brigham Young University. He said, the reason I'm no good at sports is because I'm an auditory learning, but my teachers insisted on teaching kinesthetically. I'd probably be in the NBA if they just let me listen to tapes of great games. Now, this is pretty ridiculous, right? And it's an exaggeration. But what it's saying is to learn to play basketball, you have to do this kinesthetically. So whether you're an auditory learner or you think you're an auditory learner, or you think you're a visual learner, it doesn't matter. This is how people learn it best, is kinesthetically. There might be rules of basketball that are better learned visually through drawings of the court and such. And then everyone would probably learn it better visually, even if you also can learn all these other ways. So we want to match the media to the content and the purpose. And we have different media formats. We have text, image, sound, video, and interaction. And probably more that I don't have on here right now. But these are ways that I can understand and get information or content, or I can interact with the content. Then from media, we go to different types of genre. And this is for communication, including teaching and learning. So for example, we might have an audio medium, and the genre we're using is a podcast. And so you see this article here, Curious Kindergartens Create Podcasts to learn about community members in tech. They're using a podcast to have an audio format to explore talking and learning with people. And that talking conversation is partly, an action that they're doing, and they're listening to the responses. And it gives them something that would be different than just reading about community members. No matter what kind of learner they may believe they are, this is still probably most effective for pretty much all of them. There might be cultural differences, and there are some differences, but not necessarily in media format. Another media form would be text and image, and that's where an infographic comes in. Infographics are really good for comparing types of information and structuring information. So if we're comparing two things, like this compares fixed and growth mindset, by putting them visually next to each other, it helps us really understand the differences. So that's a really good thing for comparing and understanding information. Another is an interaction, which is a simulation. And I'm going to show you these in a minute. But there's some interactive media that you can learn some concepts really well through the simulation, because it allows you to interact in a way that is more effective than you might have otherwise. So we're going to come back to that, but we're going to take a little interlude and talk about TPACK first. Okay, so I want you to think of excellent teachers. What do excellent teachers have? What do they do? You might say something like these things. They listen, they explain things, they build relationships, they ask students good questions, they're patient, right? Now, I was a music teacher originally, so I want to think about what's a good musician, an excellent musician. If I'm a musician, I'm master technique, rhythm, intonation, music reading, blending, expressing, listening. These are skills of very good musicians. So if I'm good at teaching in general, which is this, and I'm a good musician, does that mean I'm a good music teacher? Not always. Sometimes you'll have people who are really good musicians, but they're not good music teachers. Or they know how to teach some things, but they're not as good at teaching music. So I'm going to go more specific now and talk about amazing violin teachers, because that is what I taught, is violin and orchestra in general. So to know this, I knew things like to watch students' thumbs. Now, if you're not a musician, not a string player, you probably have no idea what that meant. But as a orchestra teacher, I knew that this was a way to make sure they were holding things well. I know that when they see a lot of black, they play as fast as they can, that they just struggle with this string crossing. They can match the technique. Everything else will be easier. Through experience teaching, I learned specific stuff about teaching violin. So what we have right now is teachers and how to teach, and that's called pedagogy. Pedagogy is just the ways we teach teaching. And then the content is the music. And then if I can put the two together, that's where we get in the middle. So pedagogical knowledge is knowing how to teach. Content knowledge is knowing the content or the stuff you're teaching. And pedagogical content knowledge is being able to teach a certain content area. So this comes from Schulman, and there's things like, how do learners think about these ideas? What types of misconceptions do they have about these concepts? So, if I'm teaching science, I'm probably going to know that there's certain misconceptions students have. And so I need that pedagogical content knowledge to understand it. What are common mistakes and errors, sequencing? How do I know whether they understand something? So here's an example. This is for pre-algebra, and I also taught math. And so I know pedagogical content knowledge that they struggle with completing operations with positive and negative numbers, and they have a hard time understanding why -1 times -1 equals 1. I also know that they usually believe that equals means the answer. So this is pedagogical content knowledge I have. And by having this knowledge, I'm better at teaching pre-algebra because I know how to address this and help students understand these things. Now we're going to make it more complicated. Here, I just want you to focus on this part here. This is pedagogical content knowledge is right here. We're adding technological knowledge to the mix. So not only do I know how to teach, and I know how to teach math, and I know math, and I know how to teach math, I know technology, and I know how to teach math using technology. Okay. And a lot of that is, how do I represent mathematical content so students can understand it well? And that is called TPACK, Technological Pedagogical Content Knowledge. How do I use technology to teach math or to teach science or whatever content area? Okay, so that's our interlude about what TPACK is. We're going to talk about TPACK in media. So back to this pre-algebra example. I know they have a hard time with positive and negative numbers, but I also know for my TPACK, if I add technology to this, a simulation can help them visualize it. So I've got a simulation right here, and you can see how this works. Whoops. That I can actually add positive and negative numbers here, and I can put tick marks, and I can help them kind of see how things work together and the inequalities here, right? And so that helps them start visualizing and interacting with these number lines with positive and negative numbers. And there's a whole bunch of variations of this we could do. I can look at absolute value. It helps you understand what absolute value is. I'm not sure what opposite does. The opposite of numbers. But I might know that this type of technology can help students understand that concept, and that's TPACK, right? Okay, so now we're going to go back to pre-algebra again. Here we go. I might know that learners usually struggle with, another thing I know to help them with positive and negative numbers is that games can automatize the math facts, so they just memorize them really fast. So I might give them math games because that technology, that interactive technology, can really help them automatize so they don't have to think so hard every time they see it. I also know that they often believe equals mean the answer. So we can use physical scales and talk about balance, and then we can also use digital simulations for this. And sometimes a physical scale where we can put two things here and two things there and talk about how that's equal is the best way to do in the beginning. And that's a technology. Even just a digital, like a basic physical scale is a technology. But I can also use something like this. Let's use this one, where I can compare X and see, it tells me what X is right here. And I can compare it with negative X. And if X is 1, negative X is going to be bigger and X is going to be smaller, right? Unless I subtract 1 here. And if X is 1, then they're equal. And I'm seeing that equal means the same, or, greater than, equal to. Actually the other way around. I can change the X. So this helps me visualize how these work, right? If I do X minus 2, that's when we get to negative X. Since if it's negative 1, then I can make them equal. So now I know they're equal, right? I was wrong before. So this can help you add 1 to each of them. You get to visualize it. And so this media form is going to help me to understand that concept. And so it's visual, it's seeing it visually, it's doing it interactively. And so based on the content, that's the best way to probably do it for most students. Now, they might be missing some basic skills that's different with different students. But as far as media form, most students are pretty similar. Okay, so remember TPACK, Technological Pedagogical Content Knowledge. I know how to teach math with technology or pre-algebra with technology. And so what you have to think about with media is, how can I represent concepts so they can understand the content? So sometimes you want to do that with pictures, sometimes with words, sometimes through sound or having them interact with something or do an activity. The next one is, what media forms might best fit demonstrating the content, and how could they show their learning? Do we want them to explain out loud, write a paper, draw a picture, create a model, create a video, create a podcast? What type of media format could the students use to show their learning? Okay, so takeaways here. Instead of focusing on learning style, Consider what activities and forms of media best support learning the content, right? You can think about differences in students as far as their cultural experiences, their prior knowledge, but it's not a difference whether they're visual or auditory learners. That's not something that's different about people, according to the research. Excellent technology using teachers have technological, pedagogical content knowledge, and TPACK can help us focus on disciplinary and pedagogical aspects of technology. So that's like the disciplinary is like the content, like math or pre-algebra, and pedagogical is how to teach that. And TPACK helps us bring all those pieces together for the best teaching. Thanks for watching.